Look, I'm going to be real because honest. My name is Alara, I'm 20, and somehow I'm the on. When Sterling, every single day he'd fin. And the way girl, it was everything. He'd smack me. Even they am visibly worked up if you. At first, I ate that attention up. My friends would roll their eyes good-naturedly when I'd brag about how Sterling couldn't keep his hands off me, even after 3 years together. My best friend, Chloe, would be stirring her latte and say, "Must be nice to have a man who still acts like he's trying to win you over." And honestly, I felt pretty smug about it. Here I was, with this incredible, handsome man who was still head over heels for me, while her husband barely looked up from his phone when she walked into a room. I had the jackpot. I had the kind of passion people write songs about. I felt special. I felt chosen. I remember one night, we were at a friend's barbecue. I was talking to a group of people, and I could just feel his eyes on me from across the yard. When I glanced over, he was just watching me, a look of pure adoration on his face. He didn't look away when I caught him. He just raised his glass in a silent toast. Later that night, he told me, "Just watching you exist is my favorite thing to do." That. How do you go from that to this? To this echoing silence in a house that used to be filled with his laughter and his touch? I was standing on top of a mountain back then, completely oblivious to the fact that I was about to single-handedly trigger the avalanche that would sweep it all away. But then, life started getting crazy. The kind of crazy that grinds you down, day by day. Work became a nightmare. I'm an architect, and we'd landed this massive, career-making project. It was exciting, but the pressure was immense. I was working 12-hour days, bringing stress home in my bones, my mind constantly churning with blueprints and client demands. On top of that, my mom had a health scare. A minor heart issue, the doctors said, but hearing the words heart and issue in the same sentence about your own mother sends a spike of cold fear through you that doesn't just go away. I was worried, constantly checking my phone, driving to her place on weekends. I was just exhausted. All the time. Emotionally, physically, mentally drained. And that's when Sterling's constant physical attention started feeling less like love and more like pressure. Every hug seemed to linger a little too long, turning into him getting excited. Every kiss felt like it was leading somewhere I didn't have the energy to go. It was like he couldn't just touch me normally, platonically, without it becoming this whole sexual thing. I started noticing it more and more, my tired mind cataloging every instance. We'd be watching TV, and he'd pull me close to cuddle. Within minutes, I could feel him against my leg, getting turned on just from having me against him. I'd try to shift, to create a little space, feeling a prickle of annoyance. Or I'd give him a quick peck goodbye in the morning, my mind already on my first meeting, and he'd try to deepen it, getting all worked up before I had to run out the door. It was like my body was some kind of trigger for him. And honestly, it started making me feel weird. It made me feel like an object, not a person. The thing is, Sterling never, ever pushed me for anything. He'd get excited, sure, but he never made it my problem to deal with. He'd just kind of adjust himself, maybe take a deep breath, and move on. He never complained. He never guilt-tripped me. But I started feeling like I couldn't just be affectionate without it turning into this performance for him. Like, could he not just hug his wife without his body reacting like that? Was that too much to ask? My friends started getting on my nerves too. Chloe would ask, "How are things with Mr. Perfect?" and make jokes about how Sterling was probably climbing the walls if I wasn't in the mood. They had no idea how irritating it was becoming, to feel like every touch was loaded with a sexual energy I just didn't have the capacity to handle. I just wanted normal affection sometimes. Not everything had to be about desire. Looking back now, I can see it so clearly. I was building up resentment about something that should have made me feel loved and wanted. But at the time, especially when I was already stretched so thin by everything else, it just felt overwhelming. So I started pulling back. Just a little. I wouldn't reciprocate the touches as much. I'd give him a one-armed hug instead of a full embrace. I started trying to create some space, both physically and emotionally. But Sterling didn't seem to notice my signals. Or if he did, he didn't understand them. He just kept being the same affectionate, physically responsive husband he'd always been. And I convinced myself that he should be able to read my mood better. He should know when I just needed comfort and not sexual energy. But I never actually told him that. Not in plain words. I just expected him to figure it out somehow. And when he didn't, I got more and more frustrated. I was a bottle of soda, shaken one too many times. The cap was about to fly off. The stage was set for everything to blow up, and I had no idea how bad it was about to get. So there I was, already wound up tight from weeks of feeling like my husband couldn't touch me without getting turned on, when everything finally exploded. It was a Tuesday night, and I'd had the worst day at work. Everything that could go wrong did. A contractor messed up a key measurement, a client hated a design I'd spent 50 hours on, and my boss had been on my case all day. I came home feeling like a tightly coiled spring, just wanting to collapse on the couch, decompress, and maybe watch some mindless reality TV with my husband. Sterling could tell I was stressed the second I walked in. He's always been good at reading my moods, which is something I usually love about him. He didn't bombard me with questions. He just took my bag, kissed my forehead, and said, "I made that pasta you like." He let me vent a little while we ate. He listened, nodding in all the right places, making sympathetic noises. He was being a good husband. A great one, even. After dinner, I was sitting on the couch, still feeling the tension humming in my shoulders. He came over and started gently massaging them. It felt good at first. Really, really good. His strong hands worked out the knots in my neck and shoulders, and I felt myself finally starting to relax. I leaned my head back, closing my eyes. But then, he leaned down and started kissing my neck softly. His hands moved from my shoulders to caress my arms. And within maybe 2 minutes, I could feel him pressed against the back of the couch. And yeah, he was getting aroused. Again, something inside me just snapped. All that built-up frustration, all that irritation, all that feeling of being overwhelmed came pouring out in a torrent of ugly, unfiltered rage. I whipped my head around, pulling away from him so fast he stumbled back a step. "You always sexualize me," I spat, my voice laced with a venom I didn't even know I had in me. "And it's disgusting." The word came out harsher than I even meant it to. Disgusting. It just hung there in the air between us, ugly and final. But I was so fed up with feeling like I couldn't get simple, uncomplicated comfort from my own husband without it turning sexual. Sterling stepped back like I'd physically slapped him. His face went completely blank. All the warmth, all the love that was usually there just vanished. For a second that stretched into an eternity, neither of us said anything. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator. Then, very quietly, he said, "I can't help that I'm attracted to my wife. I'm a young, healthy man, Alara. This is normal." But I was already too worked up to listen to reason. I was on a roll. "Just stop," I told him, my voice rising. "It's irritating. I can't even get a normal hug from you without you getting all worked up. It's like you can't touch me without making it about sex." Sterling looked hurt. A deep, profound hurt I'd never seen on his face before. "I don't make it about sex," he said, his voice still quiet, which somehow made it worse. "I just can't control how my body reacts to being close to you. I've never pressured you. I've never made it your problem to deal with." No. And he was right. He was 100% right. He never had. But I was too defensive, too frustrated, and too deep in my own stress-fueled narrative to admit that. Instead, I doubled down. "Well, figure it out," I said, crossing my arms. "It's gross, and I'm tired of it." Gross. Another dagger. Sterling just stared at me for a long moment. I could see something changing in his expression. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was like he was processing something incredibly painful, like watching a cherished photograph burn. "Okay," he said finally. His voice was flat, empty. "I understand." Then he turned and went to our bedroom without another word. I sat on that couch for a long time, my heart pounding. I felt justified, but also kind of sick to my stomach. Deep down, a small, sane part of me knew I'd been cruel. Sterling had been showing me love and desire in the only way he knew how, and I'd called it disgusting. I'd shamed him for it. But I was too proud to go apologize. And honestly, a selfish part of me felt relieved that maybe, just maybe, now he'd back off a little. I had no idea. I had no idea I'd just set off a chain reaction that would systematically destroy every single good thing in our marriage. Sterling wasn't the type to fight or argue back. He just took what I said, absorbed it, and decided to protect himself the only way he knew how. And that protection was going to hurt me more than I ever could have imagined. That night, he didn't try to cuddle me in bed like he always did. He stayed on his side, a rigid line of formality between us. When I woke up in the morning, he was already up and getting ready for work. There was no good morning kiss, no lingering hug before he left. Just a polite, "Have a good day," and he was gone. I told myself it was temporary, that he was just processing what I'd said, that he was hurt and needed some space. But looking back, that was the moment everything fundamentally changed between us. I had rejected the very core of how he showed his love and desire for me. And Sterling, being the man he was, decided to respect my wishes in the most literal, devastating way possible. The change was immediate and absolute. Sterling went from being the most physically affectionate husband I knew to barely touching me at all. No more random hugs throughout the day. No more playful butt slaps in the kitchen. No more pulling me close on the couch while we watched TV. He would give me a quick, chaste peck on the cheek goodbye in the morning, but only if I initiated it. There was no lingering, no deepening of the kiss, nothing that might even remotely lead to him getting aroused and disgusting me. At first, I felt relieved. Finally, I could just exist in my own house without feeling like every interaction was charged with a sexual tension I didn't want. I could hug my husband without him getting turned on. I could cuddle on the couch without his body responding. It was exactly what I thought I wanted. But by the end of the first week, something felt off, deeply off. I was doing dishes one evening, and Sterling walked past me to get something from the fridge. Normally, he would have squeezed my waist, or whispered something flirty in my ear. Instead, he just said, "Excuse me," and went about his business. It felt so formal, so cold, like we were roommates instead of a married couple who were supposed to be madly in love. When I tried to bring it up, trying to sound casual, asking why he'd stopped being so affectionate, Sterling's explanation was so logical, so calm, it made me want to scream. "You said my physical responses were disgusting," he said, not even looking at me, just looking inside the refrigerator. "I don't want to risk getting aroused and making you uncomfortable again." I argued back, my voice defensive. "So you're saying it's impossible for you to show me any affection at all without getting excited? That's ridiculous." Sterling just shrugged, closing the fridge door. "It happens naturally when I'm close to you. Since I can't control it, the only logical solution is to avoid the situations where it might happen." The worst part was how reasonable he sounded. Like he'd thought this through, analyzed the problem, and decided this was the most efficient way to handle my complaint. But it wasn't what I wanted at all. I wanted him to somehow magically find a way to be affectionate without the sexual response. I wanted the comfort without the desire. I wanted him to change his basic biological wiring to suit my stressed-out mood. I didn't want him to just stop being affectionate altogether. "So, you're just going to punish me forever because I asked you to tone it down a bit?" I asked him one night, my voice sharp with frustration, after he politely declined to cuddle while we watched a movie. He finally looked at me then, his eyes tired. "I'm not punishing you, Alara," he said, his voice completely neutral. I'm respecting your boundaries. You made it very clear that my physical responses make you uncomfortable. So I'm making sure that doesn't happen anymore. I could hear the hurt underneath the neutral tone, even though he was trying to hide it. And that's when it really hit me that maybe, just maybe, I'd gone too far. But instead of apologizing, I got defensive. Why should I have to apologize for asking my husband to control himself? Why was I the bad guy for not wanting to feel sexualized every single time he touched me? But the thing is, I was starting to miss it. I was starting to miss feeling desired. I missed the way Sterling used to look at me, like I was a piece of art he could never get tired of studying. I missed feeling wanted and attractive and irresistible to my own husband. Now, he looked at me the same way he looked at anyone else. Politely, respectfully, but without that special spark. That fire that used to make me feel so incredibly special. The silence in our house was growing louder every day. The role reversal was gradual, then all at once. 3 months into this new cold reality, I was feeling more unwanted than I ever had in our entire relationship. I had become the pursuer. I was chasing the ghost of the husband I used to have. I'd get dressed up for a date night, wearing a dress I knew he loved, hoping he'd compliment me with that old fire in his eyes. He'd just say, "You look nice," in the same tone he'd used to comment on the weather. I'd try to be flirty or suggestive, brushing my hand against his as we walked. He'd just smile politely and change the subject. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. I had complained about feeling sexualized, and now I felt completely and utterly desexualized by the one person whose desire I secretly craved. Sterling was treating me exactly like I'd asked him to like someone he could touch without any sexual response, and it was making me absolutely miserable. I started trying to initiate intimacy more, hoping to spark some of that old passion, to prove to both of us that it was still there. But Sterling would respond just enough to not reject me completely, and then he would pull back before things could get too heated. It was like he was keeping himself on a tight leash, constantly monitoring his own reactions to make sure he didn't cross the line I had drawn, the line where his desire became disgusting. And I hated it. By month 4, I was going crazy. Sterling had turned into this polite, distant version of himself, and I was starting to panic that I'd permanently broken something between us. He still did nice things for me. He'd still make my coffee in the morning, still help around the house, still ask about my day, but it all felt so surface level. It was like he was going through the motions of being a good husband, but without any of the passion or desire that used to drive those actions. I tried everything to get a reaction out of him. I'd wear his favorite t-shirt to bed, the one that used to drive him wild. I'd suggest watching movies that I knew he found romantic. But Sterling had apparently mastered the art of appreciating me without getting aroused by me, and it was driving me insane. How was this the same man who used to get turned on just from the scent of my shampoo? The worst part was how calm he was about everything. When I'd get frustrated and ask why he was being so distant, he'd explain in that same maddeningly reasonable tone that he was just being respectful. When I'd point out that we barely had any physical intimacy anymore, he'd remind me, without malice, that I'd called his natural responses disgusting, so he was trying to avoid that. But I didn't mean you should just shut down completely. I finally exploded one night. It was after he'd politely declined my suggestion to take a shower together, something that used to be a regular, fun, and intimate part of our marriage. Sterling looked at me then, his eyes full of a weariness that seemed to age him. "Alara," he said, his voice soft but firm, "I don't know how to want you the way I used to without my body responding the way it always has. You can't ask me to desire you, but not show that desire physically. It's a package deal. It's how I'm wired. So I chose not to put either of us in that position anymore. I wanted to shake him. I wanted to scream. This wasn't what I'd asked for. I had wanted him to control his physical responses, not to eliminate them entirely by shutting down his desire for me. But every time I tried to explain that, he'd just patiently point out that he literally couldn't control those responses. That's how male bodies work. He couldn't pick and choose. I had asked for the impossible. And in his attempt to give it to me, he had simply unplugged himself from me. I was chasing a ghost in my own home, and the worst part was, I was the one who had killed him. Around month 5, Sterling had to go on a work trip for 6 days. Normally, I would have missed him like crazy, and he would have called me every night, wanting to talk for hours. This time, our conversations were brief and polite. He'd ask about my day, tell me a little about his meetings, and then we'd say goodnight. There was no flirting, no, I miss you, no talking about how much he was looking forward to coming home to me. When he got back, something was different. It wasn't just the same distant politeness he'd been showing me for months. There was something else. He seemed more thoughtful, more settled in some way. Like he'd figured something out while he was away. I tried to welcome him home the way I used to, with enthusiastic hugs and kisses, chattering excitedly about having him back. But Sterling responded the same way he'd been responding to everything. Politely, briefly, without any real enthusiasm. It was like hugging a kind stranger. That's when the real panic set in. I'd been telling myself that this was all temporary. That eventually, Sterling would get over his hurt feelings and things would go back to normal. But looking at him after that trip, I realized this might be who he was now. This polite, distant man who treated me like a roommate he was fond of but not passionate about. That night, 2 days after he came back, my world completely fell apart. We were having dinner, one of those quiet, surface-level conversations we'd been having for months, when Sterling suddenly put down his fork and looked at me with this serious, calm expression. "Alara," he said. His voice was even. "I don't think we're sexually compatible anymore. Maybe we should consider separating." I literally choked on my food. I coughed, my eyes watering. The word "what" caught in my throat. "Where is this coming from?" I finally managed to get out, my voice raspy. Sterling was quiet for a moment, like he was choosing his words very carefully. "Our intimacy dropped to almost nothing after you told me my attraction to you was disgusting. I've been thinking about it a lot, especially while I was away. And I don't think this is sustainable for either of us." But that's not what I meant," I said, panic rising in my chest like a tidal wave. "I just wanted you to tone it down a little, not stop completely." "I can't tone down something I can't control, Alara," Austin replied, his voice patient but firm. "And I can't live in a marriage where my wife finds my desire for her disgusting. It's not fair to either of us." And that's when he dropped the real bomb. He told me about his business trip. About how one evening, after a work dinner, some colleagues had gone to a bar for a nightcap. There was a younger woman there, a junior associate from another branch, who had started flirting with him. Nothing inappropriate happened, he was quick to clarify, and I believed him. That wasn't who he was. But the attention, it made me realize something. He looked at me, his eyes filled not with anger, but with a deep sadness. "I haven't felt wanted in months, Alara," he said quietly. "This stranger showed more appreciation for me in one conversation than you have since that night you called me disgusting. And that's when I realized how deeply unhappy I've become. I felt like I was going to be sick. So, you want to leave me for some random girl at a bar?" The accusation was pathetic, even to my own ears. "No," Sterling said firmly. "I want to leave because I deserve to be with someone who doesn't find my attraction to them revolting. Someone who appreciates being desired instead of calling it gross." I started crying then. Ugly, desperate tears. "I never said you were revolting. I was just stressed and overwhelmed. You're blowing this way out of proportion." But Sterling wasn't buying it anymore. He'd had months of quiet reflection. "You said it was disgusting, Alara. You said it was irritating and gross. Do you have any idea what that did to me? I spent 3 years thinking I was the luckiest man alive to have a wife I was so insanely attracted to, and in one night, you made me feel like a pervert for wanting my own wife." "That's not what I meant," I kept saying, the words sounding weaker each time. But I had said those things. I had called his love for me disgusting. He continued, his voice steady. And it's not just that one moment, it's everything else. When's the last time you complimented me? When's the last time you initiated anything and really meant it? When's the last time you made me feel like you actually wanted me and weren't just tolerating my attention? I couldn't answer. Because he was right. I'd gotten so comfortable being the one who was pursued and desired that I'd never bothered to reciprocate. I had taken his constant adoration for granted, and then complained when it became inconvenient for me. So what, you're just giving up? I asked, desperation making my voice shrill. You're going to throw away 3 years of marriage because of one fight? This isn't about one fight, Sterling said sadly. This is about the fact that you don't want me the way I want you, and you resent me for wanting you at all. That's not a marriage, Alara. That's just me being grateful for scraps of affection from someone who finds my love disgusting. That night, he slept in the guest room, and for the first time I realized I might actually lose him. Not to another woman, but to my own selfishness, my own pride, and my utter inability to appreciate what I had. But even then, even facing the complete and total destruction of my marriage, a stubborn, ugly part of me still thought he was overreacting. Part of me still thought this was his fault for being too sensitive. I still didn't get it. Not really. The next few weeks were a nightmare that just kept getting worse. Sterling wasn't just threatening to leave, he was actually doing it. He started sleeping in the guest room permanently. He started talking to lawyers. He started looking at apartments online. And the worst part was how calm and determined he seemed about all of it. There was no anger, no shouting. Just a quiet, sad resolve. I tried everything to get him to reconsider. I cried. I begged. I apologized, over and over. I promised things would be different. But Sterling had this look in his eyes like he was already gone. Like he'd already grieved our marriage while I was still trying to bargain with him. I spent 6 months trying to be the husband you wanted, Alara, he told me one afternoon, when I begged him to give us another chance. Someone who could show you affection without desire. Someone who could love you without wanting you. And you know what I learned? That's not love. That's just going through the motions. I can't live like that. And you shouldn't have to, either. I started stalking his social media like a crazy person, looking for signs of the woman from the bar, or any other woman. What I found was somehow worse than infidelity. Sterling had been reconnecting with old friends from college. He'd taken up woodworking again, a hobby I'd gradually discouraged because it made too much of a mess in the garage. He was going to therapy. He was building a life without me, right in front of my eyes. He was becoming this confident, happy, centered version of himself that I barely recognized. My friends started asking questions when they noticed Sterling wasn't around anymore. When I tried to explain what happened, twisting the story to make myself sound like the victim, I could see them exchanging glances. Chloe actually said it. Wait, you called him disgusting for being attracted to you, Alara? That's really harsh. Even my own friends were taking his side. They remembered all my complaints about Sterling being too affectionate and always turned on. And now, they were looking at me like I was insane for destroying that. The real punch to the gut came when I found out through a mutual friend that Sterling was dating someone. Not the woman from the bar. Someone new. Someone he'd met through a hiking group. A 26-year-old teacher who apparently thought Sterling was the most amazing man on the planet and wasn't shy about showing it. I did something crazy. I drove past the coffee shop where I heard they liked to meet on Sunday mornings, and I saw them. They were sitting outside, laughing. And Sterling looked happy. Genuinely, truly happy in a way I hadn't seen in months. And when she touched his arm while telling a story, he didn't pull away or seem uncomfortable. He leaned into it, like he was starving for that kind of simple, appreciative affection. That's when it hit me, what I'd really lost. Not just a husband, but a man who had loved me completely and openly. A man who had made me feel like the most desirable woman in the world. I'd had someone who couldn't keep his hands off me after 3 years of marriage, and I had thrown it all away because it was occasionally inconvenient for me. I tried to reach out to Sterling one last time. I showed up at his new apartment unannounced, holding a long letter detailing how sorry I was and how much I'd learned. But when he opened the door, he just looked tired. "Alara," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm with someone now who makes me feel good about wanting her. Someone who tells me I'm attractive, and who initiates intimacy, and who doesn't make me feel like a creep for being turned on by my own girlfriend. I can't go back. I can't go back to feeling ashamed for desiring the person I'm supposed to love. But I can change," I insisted, tears streaming down my face. "I know I messed up. I can be better." Sterling just shook his head sadly. "You had 6 months to change while I was still there, practically begging you to work on us through my actions. Instead, you just got angry that I wasn't pursuing you anymore. Ilara, even now, you're not really sorry about what you said. You're just sorry about the consequences." And he was right. He was so right. Even as I stood there crying and apologizing, a small, ugly part of me still thought he should have handled my criticism better, that he should have found a way to make me happy instead of just shutting down. I still didn't fully understand that calling someone's fundamental expression of love disgusting isn't something you just bounce back from. So now, 6 months later, I'm sitting in my half-empty house. Sterling took his share of the furniture when he moved out. I watch his new girlfriend post pictures of them on social media. They're hiking, they're at the beach, they're cooking together. She captions them with things like, "Can't believe this amazing man is mine," and "Feeling so loved and appreciated." The kinds of captions I never bothered with, because I just took Sterling's devotion for granted. He looks incredible in every photo. Confident, happy, fulfilled, like he's finally with someone who appreciates everything he has to offer, instead of calling it disgusting. And me? I'm alone. I'm alone, wondering how I managed to systematically destroy the best thing that ever happened to me, all because I was too selfish and ungrateful to recognize it while I had it. But even now, a small, foolish part of me thinks he should have fought harder for us. Part of me thinks he gave up too easily. And that, right there, that's probably why I'm sitting here alone. Because I still don't really get it. Not all the way. I still don't understand that love isn't something you can criticize and control and still expect to keep receiving. Some lessons, apparently, you only learn after it's far, far too late to matter.